Don't speak what you don't understand. The truth is not in your command. Don't shout about what you think is fake. The decision isn't yours to make. Don't lie about the way things are. The tall tales will take you very far. Don't scoff when they say it's the end. In this life you know you can't pretend. The days pass by, they've set in stone. But it's not too late now for you to change your tone. Don't speak, don't speak. Open your soul, don't harden your heart. Don't speak.
Hey everyone, it's Marianne from the New York City Organization of Public Service Retirees. Today is May 21st. It is 6 p.m. and we are doing another live interview with a city council candidate. Tonight we're hosting Ben Wetzler. You can see right below I'm running a ticker with his name and the district as well as his website so that you're free to go and click to donate or join to volunteer his campaign. He is running for City Council District 4, and that's the same district that currently Keith Powers sits in. You'll know who he is because he's one of those council members that has not supported us for the last 4 years. I think he pretty much runs for most of you, especially those of you who have been organized around the Sty Town area. So we've done some protests in his area, in the district as well, and he's just not budging. So we know that we need to find a good candidate that will replace him. He is running for another office anyway. And so we're going to start interviewing people. Tonight, I am hosting Ben Wetzler. So let me bring him in so you all can get to meet him. Hey, Ben.
Hello.
Nice to see you. Thanks for joining us. So this is New York City Retirees. We do this several times. We started only on Fridays and we ended up going almost every day of the week.
Wow.
We even do some Sundays, which is kind of crazy. But it's really important in the political process to be able to get people to know who their candidates are, especially on a intimate basis like this, where, you know, we can speak to you. You'll see comments in the chat room. People can talk to you. So we've already got a bunch of hellos. And here's Laura. Laura says, Keith Powers sees us as annoying, and it's nuts. And I feel Laura because he does annoy. He thinks we're annoying. He ignores us, and our issue is real, right? Most of us, as I'll tell all of you guys, by the way, Ben is one of those candidates that did sign our letter of support, that he does support protecting our traditional Medicare, not forcing us into Medicare Advantage, helping expedite those Medicare B reimbursements, as well as creating a grace period so that when we pass away and our healthcare dies when we die, that there's a grace period for our dependents to be able to secure healthcare, which would also affect Ben when he's elected as a council member. So let's go. So tell a little bit of everyone about who you are and why you're running, now that they know that you do support our issues, and what made you want to run for city council.
Yeah, I'm really glad. Thank you so much, Marianne, for having me here, and to all of the members of the organization who are, tuned in tonight to get to know a little bit about me. I can see just from the people in the chat that you've got people from all over, but it sounds like a lot of folks in Council District 4. I am Ben Wetzler. I am running to be your city council member. Council District 4 goes from the Upper East Side, which is where I grew up, all the way kind of down into Midtown and Murray Hill, and then all the way down to Stuyvesant Town and Peter Cooper Village, which is where my girlfriend Lauren and I have lived for the last few years. Somebody in the chat asked about 23rd and 2nd. I think that's actually slightly outside the district, unfortunately. But, close by. You said that, Marianne, you said that I would, if I were elected, eventually be a retiree who would be dealing with a lot of the issues that you all are dealing with. That's actually a little bit not true. I've worked for the state government throughout my entire career. So not the city government. It's a slightly different retirement system, but I am vested in the state employee retirement system. I get my current health care through the New York State Empire Plan. And in 30 years, when I am sure there will still be people who are trying to renege on these kinds of on these kinds of commitments, I am going to be really glad, win or lose this election, I'm going to be very glad that you all did all of the work that you've done.
Well, and to tell you, we are actually helping state workers protect their benefits, because in some of, like in Nassau County, they were trying to do that to Nassau, is diminish their benefit or pull them out of, I think it's their night shift plan. So stay tuned to that, because that is still an ongoing case in Nassau County. And if it's going on in some of these smaller counties, and I mean, Nassau County is pretty big, that starts to indicate a trend that the state may end up trying to do the same thing. So keep your eyes open statewide.
Absolutely. So I'll give you all just a little bit of my bio and then tell you what it is that made me want to run and what I'm hoping to do on the council. I grew up here on the East Side. I knew right from the get-go that I wanted to work in public service. I really never had much interest in actually going into politics, as in like working on elections or working with elected officials. But I was always a bit of a public policy geek. And so after I graduated college, I went to Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. And after I graduated, I moved up to Albany for a few years, where I started working as a data analyst with the state division of the budget. This was not sexy work. Albany is not the most fun place to be when you're a young single guy right out of college. But it did show me, it did give me a lot of insight into the importance of the work that public sector employees do, and the ways in which we as policymakers and public servants can serve the public well, and when things tend to go wrong. And I knew that the thing that I was most passionate about was housing policy. Anybody who kind of walks around in New York or has family members who are, have children or want to move into New York, or are seniors who are struggling to stay in their homes, know that New York has a pretty major housing crisis. People don't feel safe when they go on the subway because of the homelessness situation,
right,
which has gotten so much worse. Seniors feel like they can't keep paying their property taxes or the maintenance on their building, on their apartments. A lot of people, even in rent stabilized housing, which has been a major kind of legal fight here in Sty Town that affected me and my family, have been struggling with that. So I ended up working, doing data analysis at the state division of the budget. At the state housing department, which is where I've spent most of my career since then. And in 2017, right after Donald Trump got elected the first time, I decided that I really wanted to, I felt obligated to do more on the political side. I felt, there was this major change happening in national politics, and I saw that it was negatively affecting New York City and a lot of the things that I really cared about. So I joined my local Democratic club, the Four Freedoms Democratic Club on the Upper East Side. The guy who had been the Democratic Party leader for that district for decades was not really all that interested in seeing a grassroots, bottom up Democratic Party. He was very much one of these kind of top down people,
right,
barking orders at everyone, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with. In some of the organizations that you've been a part of. And some folks encouraged me to run against him. So within a very short period of time of starting to get involved in local politics, I found myself running this insurgent campaign to be the Democratic Party leader, and ended up winning that election in an upset, and served in that role for around 6 years. My partner and I moved down to Sty Town right at the end of the COVID-19 pandemic. Our landlord in our previous building on the Upper East Side wanted to raise our rent by almost $1,000 a month, coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, which was obviously not something that we could afford, but we were really lucky that we found a rent stabilized apartment here in Stuyvesant Town. When we got here, we actually found out that our landlord did not think that we should be rent stabilized. They tried to take away our rent stabilization, and our tenants association had to go to court to protect us and several thousand other people who lived here in Stuyvesant Town, and we ended up winning that lawsuit. So now they're going to have to drag me out of here, basically. But it really kind of showed me that it is very important that we have elected officials who kind of understand not only the system of government that they're going to be operating, but have actually lived through a lot of the problems that their constituents are dealing with. And being somebody who, is, like I said, living in rent stabilized housing, trying to start a family here in New York, and invested in the, dealing with working in the public sector and invested in the retirement system, it really kind of, for me, was always clear that we needed to make sure that we were keeping our promises to our retirees. So the things that I really want to accomplish on the city council are, one, on housing policy. We really don't have any kind of a long-term plan for where people are going to live or how seniors are going to stay in their homes, how we're going to accommodate kind of the next generation of people who want to move. A lot of people, especially here in Stuyvesant Town, which traditionally has been, a middle-class neighborhood, people who, multi-generational families are finding that they can't live here anymore. And not only can they not live in the complex, they can't even live in the borough. There are, people are moving all the way out to, far away from New York City. And so I had a friend of mine who had, right after he had his second kid, moved all the way out to Connecticut, not because they did not like being in New York City, but just because that was the closest place that they could afford to live. And so I really think that the city needs to have a much more long-term focus on this. We really need to stop kind of doing these like one-off building permit things that go through the Euler process, where we try and negotiate these little deals for affordable housing, and instead like really think long-term about where everyone's going to live and what our neighborhoods are going to look like, and implement the plan that starts with the community.
Right.
Also really focused on public safety, which is definitely one of the things that people are most focused on these days. I mentioned, the homelessness situation and how it intersects, our mental health system is really failing to provide the care that a lot of people need. This is also true, of even things that are as simple as our traffic system. People, I cannot talk to, I've been going out several hours a day, just kind of on the street, introducing myself to voters, and absolutely cannot get through one of those without having at least one person tell me that they were almost nicked by someone on a bicycle who was not going in the right direction or was speeding. And really, the city does not do a great job of enforcing that. In the last 5 years, I have seen more people just blast through red lights in cars or on bikes or on motorcycles or anything than I had in the previous 30 years before that. And I really think that there's a lot that the city could be doing to better enforce that. We could be using technology. Like my background is in kind of data informed policy making, and I really think you'd be surprised the amount of information that the city knows about these things. Every single city bike and every delivery person on a bicycle is being tracked by a GPS at all times by the person who owns the bicycle, either through a sensor or through the cell phone app. And the city never asks them for that information so that they can find out if the person is following the traffic laws or not. I think it's a little ridiculous.
Well, wait a second. You're saying that bike that you pick up from those little parking spaces, you unlock that bike, you pay for it. Like there's a GPS tracking.
Yeah, they got a sensor on it.
That's tracking. What does it track? Do we know?
It tracks where the bike is at any given time.
Does it track like speed and
Really? Yeah. And I think that they should have to provide that information to the city so that they can see if people are, biking dangerously, if they're not following the traffic laws. And then, not just that, but we could also use that information to figure out, like, are there parts of the city where people are not,
there's more crazy
particularly
bikers.
dangerous intersections that we could, be upgrading the infrastructure, or, they've got a particularly nasty pothole that causes problems. Like, you could use that. You can do all sorts of things with that information, but right now they don't, because
this is triggering a memory for me. Some time ago, a couple months ago, I had on a guest, Michael Kane, for Teachers for Choice. He's one of the teachers that got fired because he didn't want to take the vaccination that they were forcing on these workers. He told me that when they were doing this testing I think it was at the school or something, or the city was doing it. They were keeping their DNA, and his organization filed a lawsuit that those tests, because they're swabbing your DNA to tell whether or not you had COVID. They're using that data, and he's filed a lawsuit against the city to stop them from using that data. I wonder if you could do something similar with this bike thing.
Well, I mean, protecting people's privacy is obviously, one of the things that anytime you log onto the computer, it's really important. And I think that we need to make sure that we are doing that, that we're not abusing this kind of stuff. But, this is when you're talking about people not following traffic laws, like, that's, it's not a personal thing. It's, you're in a vehicle and you're potentially putting people in danger. You're out in public, you're potentially putting people in danger, which is why I think this kind of, I don't see those as comparable situations, only because, in one case you're talking about like invading a person,
right,
with their medical information, and the other, it's like,
yes, I appreciate that, but still, so I'll make another connection, because my brain is going somewhere else at this moment. Is there was a lawsuit against Easy Pass New York by AAA like decades ago, and because Easy Pass could do the same thing. They can track, when you see, like on the Southern State Parkway, for example, the traffic time difference, like, oh, in order to get to this intersection or to this bridge or whatever, traffic is only whatever, it's 10-minute delay or something. They know that because they're tracking speed through your Easy Pass from when you're hitting any of those screening checkpoints, wherever they're, even though you're not being told, they're able to screen your tolls. You're able to screen your Easy Pass. So back, I want to say this must have been about 15 or 20 years ago. AAA stopped Easy Pass from being able to use that data, because if they could find that you were speeding, you could have like legitimately been given a ticket because your Easy Pass told the state you were traveling at a high rate of speed. Well,
yeah, I think that would be an illegal use of I think that's like explicit. The Easy Pass rules make that explicit. With the city bike, it's like a bicycle. It's like a service where you're renting the bike. It's their bike. Yeah. So if the city wants to kind of hold them accountable for that, that's, I don't really see those as necessarily like similar things. But the Easy Pass thing is totally illegal. You're not allowed to do that.
Right. Well, if they're tracking you with a bike, though, that's just interesting. But I hear you. Okay, what's next?
But yeah, so that's on the traffic stuff. So we talked about traffic. We talked about affordability, and I really think that we need to be doing a much better job of keeping our city and our public spaces clean, and really thinking about the way that people, when they kind of walk out their door and they're walking down the sidewalk, how they're interacting with the city as a whole. The police commissioner just announced that they were going to start, they call the quality of life teams, I think, with the NYPD, and one of them is going to be at the precinct that covers 14th Street, which is where we here in Sty Town have had like a lot of persistent quality of life issues, where they're going to be dealing with things like graffiti and people leaving trash out on the sidewalk, things like that, which get overlooked. When you live in a city like New York that has all these big picture, problems, and we tend to think that little things like that are beneath us, but they're not. These are the things that matter a lot to people. And when you walk down the sidewalk, you should really be able to take pride in your neighborhood. You should really be able to care about it. You shouldn't have to be diving out of the way of bags of leaky garbage that have rats in them. The city did not, the only plan that the city, or for a while, the only plan, now they're kind of rolling out this container thing, but for a while, the only strategy, if you ask the city, how are we going to deal with the rat problem? They said, well, we were going to move trash pickup to 8 p.m. from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., which was a big pain for all of the people, who had to actually take it out and do that kind of work, or the people who were living in the building. But like, it didn't solve the rat problem. The rats don't know what time it is. They just wait until they smell the garbage and they come out and eat. So these are things that I really care about. Another big one, just in terms of street cleanliness and public space, is the scaffolding that's all over Manhattan all the time. It's really expensive for anybody who's living in like a small co-op. Here on the east side, they have to do these inspections, but right now a lot of those inspections could just be done with a high resolution camera. Now they don't really need to be sending somebody up and doing potentially dangerous work, making sure that the facade of the building is safe. And so these are kind of little common sense things that really add up and make the city feel a lot better, feel a lot cleaner, feel a lot nicer, that we really should be doing. So that's the kind of stuff that I want to do. A lot of it is really big picture, like long-term plan for where everybody is going to live in 20 years. And a lot of it is really small things, like how are we, can we make the scaffolding the facade inspection building slightly more quick so that the scaffolding comes down a little bit faster. So those are the things that I really care about. I do want to hear a lot from your members about what they care about. I have seen there were a couple questions that I saw in here, but now I am kind of losing track because there's a lot of comments in here. One of them I saw was about the casino proposal. There we go, the casino proposal. Yeah, so there's a large plot of land kind of just south of the United Nations building, which used to be when I was a kid, it was the Con Edison plant, and then they took that down and they sold it to this real estate company that has been trying to figure out what they want to do with it. It's been kind of disruptive in a lot of cases to the people in the neighborhood. But now what they want is they are one of the companies that are applying under this state process to get a casino license. And I think that is a terrible idea. The proposal, I was at one of these big community meetings where they presented what they thought was going to happen, or what they wanted to happen if they got this license. And they were saying that everybody who is going to come into the casino would be coming right off the FDR. So right away, that means everybody is either going to be in like an Uber or a taxi cab or something. They're not going to have anybody coming in on the bus or anything. And since this is right next to the UN, where people are constantly illegally double parked, and there's very little traffic enforcement because of that, having suddenly this huge flood of tourists coming in via taxi, right from the airport, I think is probably going to be a terrible, terrible thing in terms of traffic for the neighborhood, not to mention the other quality of life problems that come from casino gambling. So I'm really against that. I do think that plot of land would be a lot better off if for use as more middle class housing. Back in the 1950s, when we had a big empty plot of previously industrial land, they built it up as a Mitchell-Lama co-op for middle working class families. But instead, now we're talking about this, and I think that's just a failure of imagination on behalf of the city. So I would really be against that proposal. I do believe that the vote on whether that proposal can move forward or not will happen. It's one of these. They do this a lot, where they, they try and kind of sneak these things in. And I believe the vote, the way that they set the timeline up, is the vote will be after the election, but before we take office. So I am definitely against it. I don't want to see it happen, but it's possible. I think that what I could do to stop it would be more in a kind of advocacy role than necessarily anything legal, just because of the time. It might be too
time
late
frame.
I'm actually in office.
So John says Sty Town PCV was the city and corporate sector working together. The World War II vets who moved in were living in tenements. My first job was at Lenz's Delicatessen. Sty Town was Archie Bunkerville until 1990, and then MetLife got greedy and the place went high rent.
Yeah, well, first of all, love Lenz's Delicatessen. I live just, I live on 20th Street, so it's right there. That's where I get most of my lunches over the course during the day. Yeah, I mean, that is really something that we are dealing with a lot in, I think all of New York City is kind of feeling this pressure of feeling like their neighborhoods are changing because the cost of housing has just gotten so much higher that they can't have families living in the same area that their children grew, where their children grew up. That the middle class is kind of constantly getting pushed out. And for me, it's really important that we make sure that we are aggressively enforcing rent stabilization. I say that, because I, I told you about my experience and how, we kind of moved. We were really glad to have found this apartment and we're ready to kind of lay down roots, and didn't realize that it might be taken away from us. And we had to kind of go through this whole legal fight. And I think that it's, the people who grew up here and whose families have been here for multiple generations are, I think, feeling that, 2 or 3 times worse than what we're dealing with. So I'm definitely supportive of that. And I think it's really my top priority in terms of preserving the character of the neighborhood and the ability for families to stay here, is making sure that Sty Town does not get any, the rents in Sty Town kind of don't get any much higher than they've already gotten.
Gotcha. Here's another question. Have you heard about the bigger, better bottle bill? I don't know. Judith, I don't know what that is.
Provide a little bit more context.
Neither does Ben, so tell us what it is. Or I'm going to have to Google it.
Robert Silverstein, it looks like in the chat, asked about for seniors and retirees to stay in Manhattan or NYC, given everything working against us: hospital closures, housing affordability, and public safety. So in terms of the housing affordability thing is probably the biggest pressure. I had a very close friend of mine who I knew through the Democratic Club, who had been living in a rent stabilized walk-up for decades. He was, not paying a lot in rent. He never had any kind of serious issues with his landlord. He had worked for the City Department of Transportation for a long time and had pretty bad arthritis in his legs. And after a while, just couldn't get up the stairs and had to move to an assisted living facility outside the state, in a different state, because there was no accessible senior housing that was affordable to him in the neighborhood. And I think that that's really a tragedy. And it really is reflective of the lack of kind of long-term planning. It's not like anybody didn't know 10 or 20 years ago that we had such a lack of affordable housing that's accessible for seniors. And so we really need to, I think, make sure that anytime we're investing in or thinking about new housing, that we're making sure that it's the kind of place where somebody who has lived in this neighborhood for their entire life, but no longer, has additional needs that need to be met, whether they're, wheelchair accessibility or, additional health needs, that we are, that's top of mind and our top priority. The hospital closure question was, really kind of shocking to a lot of us. Mount Sinai Beth Israel is the hospital kind of right near here, and they closed after Mount Sinai bought it because they said they thought that this was going to be a great investment and they would be able to provide such great care to the community. And then immediately they were like, oh, actually, we think we could make more money if we just shut it down, move everybody else, and then sold, the land to somebody else. And it really felt like a kind of bait and switch that they pulled on the community. But they got the approval from the state's health department. And I think that I've been talking to people who work at the other surrounding hospitals in the neighborhood, especially the city hospitals, like at Bellevue, the city hospital at Bellevue. And I don't think anybody really believes that the emergency rooms in the vicinity around here, or really anywhere in Lower Manhattan, are going to be able to accommodate the need without Mount Sinai. So making sure that we are replacing that hospital with a really good modern facility that can account for all, can accommodate everybody's needs and keep them affordable, is definitely going to be a major challenge. And it's something that I care a lot about. And I know that the people around my neighbors around here really care a lot about. Yes, Lenox Hill Hospital is in the district. Yeah, that's another one. And really it just shows you comparing these two kind of situations with these two hospitals. Here in Lower Manhattan, we are losing a hospital. Here, on the kind of southern half of the 4th district, we are losing an important hospital that's really critical for our community. In the Upper East Side half of the district, they're getting this, Northwell wants to spend $1 gajillion in 11 years building a new hospital, but it's not going to actually add any new hospital beds, new treatment capacity, very little treatment capacity. It's just going to be fancier, essentially. And the current Lenox Hill Hospital definitely needs to be renovated, but it doesn't, there's a very big difference between spending, a couple years creating a new hospital, that within the context of the existing building layout, or of a comparable size, and building a much kind of bigger, fancier one just to say that you did, and so that you can charge more. And so I really want that project to move forward more along the lines of the current hospital, with a much shorter timeline and a much smaller building.
11 years, if I'm reading that right, is a long time.
Well, and they had originally said 11, or now I'm mixing up the amount of time, but they had originally said even longer than that. And I remember asking one of the representatives of Northwell at one of the community board meetings if there was, what they could do for the construction timeline to shrink it down, to shorten it. And they said there was absolutely nothing, but now they are saying that they actually can do it a little bit shorter. So clearly there is definitely stuff that they could be doing to make it
could do.
But yeah, to make it more reasonable. But the 11 years is totally you're essentially taking an entire person.
Decade.
Yeah, there could be a child born in that neighborhood who would live their entire life hearing nothing but like drills and
jackhammers,
construction equipment. It's a little bit unreasonable.
Absolutely. Laura says, even the affordable housing isn't affordable. Seems the real estate brokers get their deals before the rest of us find affordable apartments we can struggle to pay for. I was actually looking for another apartment. I was looking for an apartment in Brooklyn, and this woman advertised on a social media ad that she had affordable housing in Brooklyn. When I called, her apartments were over $3,500 a month. I was like, who is that affordable to? I'm just like asking, like, what is your market reach for this? Because I really don't know too many people that their rent could be $3,500. My mortgage isn't $3,500.
Yeah. I mean, the problem, New York City has such a bad affordable housing crisis, and it's gone on for so long that even people who you would think of as kind of middle class or upper middle class people really are kind of struggling to find any kind of housing that meets their needs. And when the city invests its resources into trying to accommodate that, they tend to say, oh, well, like if you $3,500 a month, that would be somebody making, I don't know, I'm not going to do the math off the top of my head, but that could be someone like upper middle class. They need affordable housing too, but it's like, okay, but then you're still paying your entire paycheck. And I think we as a city, really need to go back to the older, more successful models of affordable housing development, which aren't really like cutting these kinds of deals, and really more are along the lines of like the Mitchell-Lama program or some of the other ones where middle class people could invest in affordable co-ops and build wealth for themselves, and people who were going into subsidized housing, whether it was with a voucher program or something like that, that they were paying a rent that's actually really reasonable for their level of income, because what we're getting right now tends to be not that much different from market rate.
Got it.
It doesn't provide you with the same level of long term. The apartments tend to be pretty small and not very great.
So Maggie says, what is the bigger, better bottle bill? The bigger, better bottle bill, that's a real tongue twister, is A2517B, DiNapoli, S1290B, Laval, would extend the current 5-cent current deposit law to include non-carbonated beverages.
So that based on the numbers that you got there, it sounds like this is state legislation, not city legislation. I think that it's important that we try and mitigate the amount of waste that goes into landfills. That's true of anything. It's true of food scraps that need to be composted. It's definitely true of plastic. So anything that I think the city can do to discourage people from using plastic and then just throwing it away without thinking about where it's going to be, I think is a good thing.
Robert, do you see a way that seniors and retirees would be able to choose to stay in Manhattan or New York City, given the compelling issues working against us, hospital closures, affordable housing, public safety, etc.?
Yeah, so I mean, we talked about the hospital situation and the housing situation. In terms of public safety, this is definitely something that a lot of seniors are concerned about. The homelessness situation, I mean, not just seniors, everybody is concerned about. The homelessness situation has really gotten very bad, especially on the subways, in a way that makes people not feel safe. We in Sty Town here had just last summer, there was an incident where multiple people were killed in a stabbing incident. It was a group of people got into a fight, and somebody pulled a knife, and 2 people ended up dying on the street. And as a result of it, the NYPD said, because 14th Street separates 2 police precincts, they said they were going to take a kind of mobile command center, and they were going to station it there to coordinate between the 2 of them and make sure that they always kind of had somebody there quickly responding to these kinds of safety concerns. That never materialized. They kind of had one there temporarily for a little bit and then left. They've definitely done a better job of making sure that there are more officers patrolling the area than there was, a few years ago when I first moved in, where it was really it was really bad at the end of the COVID-19 pandemic. But we need to, make sure that we're doing a better job of doing this, making sure that there is a police officer where they need to be. That I think is another thing where, just data informed policy making is good, not because you don't want to be tracking individual people and sending the cops after them. That gets a little like science fiction dystopian. Yeah. But back in the 90s, when crime was much higher than it is today, the way that they got it back down was if you were a precinct commander or a police captain, they might just randomly call you and say, hey, come down to City Hall today. We're going to ask you about the crime that's happening in your neighborhood. And if you didn't know what was going on in your neighborhood, or what had happened that the previous week or the previous month, you got chewed out. And after a few times that happened, everybody knew exactly where the major hot spots of crime that were happening in their jurisdictions were, and they took steps to make sure that there was always a police officer there who could respond. Right now, 80% of the crime that happens on the subway happens on the platform or on the train itself. But a lot of the time you see officers, they're kind of stationed at the front, at the entrance. That's, just a very basic example of, paying attention to the trends and making sure that you're putting somebody in a place where they can respond most quickly. And I think it'll have a very quick effect in making people feel a lot safer. Absolutely. Let's see. I'm going to probably highlight one question to give you a minute, and then I'm just going to go check my dinner in the oven because I forgot it's in there. Retaining experienced first responders.
Yep. Oops.
Yeah, there has been a really serious problem with people in those types of doing that kind of work for the city, leaving after the very high or a very low retention rate. People don't feel that the work hours and the pay that they receive is commensurate with the level of difficulty of the job, and I think that that's true. People neglect the EMS or the other first responders. They don't really think of them as the heroes that they are until you're in a position where you need one, and then suddenly you realize that this is actually one of the most important things that the city does, and we really need to be giving, not just treating them with respect, but making sure that their pay and their working conditions reflect that. And I think that it's very easy for city council members or people in the city administration to kick the can a little bit and say, oh, we're going to cut corners on this, but
Right.
we really do, if we're going to have world-class EMS and fire and police, we got to make sure that they've got good working conditions and they're working with the best equipment and that their pay is good, because right now a lot of people kind of start these jobs and then leave them.
Right. So I'm former EMS, and part of that problem is that they've been underpaid. So if you speak to some of the EMS personnel today, we've been asking for parity for decades, and it's been a line that's been suppressed still by the current negotiating people because they've been there for like 30 years. And the current current commissioner, she subcontracts out her contracting for the unions to Bob Lynn, who used to be the Commissioner of Labor Relations. He retired in like 2017, and the city hired him back at $500 an hour. He's been negotiating this contracts now going back under the Koch administration, because EMS is relatively young per se compared to the rest of many of the other agencies. EMS was born in like 1973. So in the 80s, Bob Lynn was, late 70s, early 80s. He was a young worker, like in his 30s, working for the city and working his way up. But in all the documents that we have going back to that period, they did not ever want to give uniform status to EMS. And they've suppressed that job line, which today is to the detriment of the residents of the city of New York, because you cannot keep people in those positions where their jobs, like, look, they just convicted a guy for killing one of my former captains. She worked with me on the ambulance, but she was later promoted to captain, who was killed in Astoria by a psychopath. Our jobs are dangerous. We work side by side with police and fire. So for the city not to take up this as seriously, it's so disturbing to me on so many levels that this council has not really done what it needs to do to attract and retain people. Our staffing in the city of New York is about 25,000 people short. And this is going still back to COVID. Before COVID, people don't want to work for the city. And it's because of the way they're treated, their jobs, their pay, their benefits. And if you keep reducing them, why would anyone want to work here? That is something that has to be focused on, that no one's making a priority. So
I'm 100% in support of pay parity for EMS workers. I was 12 years old on 9/11, and as far as I'm living in New York City, and as far as I'm concerned, it's just permanently imprinted on my brain, the heroism of New York City's police and fire and emergency services people. Yeah. So as far as there's nothing that they could ask for that I think they wouldn't deserve. And it really is, you see it in the retention statistics that people start these jobs because they're enthusiastic about helping people and they want to save lives. And then they realize that they're not being given the attention and the
an affordable, livable wage. Yes. Yeah. It's disturbing, absolutely disturbing. I'm always at ground zero. Every time I'm in the city, I'm in ground zero. I have to be there. The things that we lived through were remarkable. And when I was there a week ago, I bumped into one of my retirees who works as a volunteer for the 9/11 Museum. And both she and her husband are dealing with World Trade Center illnesses. And I was filming that video because what the city and the Municipal Labor Committee under the leadership of the UFT and DC 37 did to us, this also affects not just retirees, the elderly, the disabled. It also affects 9/11 responders and survivors. It affects our line of duty widows, our spouses that lost a spouse in the line of duty, whether it was 9/11 or otherwise, and it affects our disabled children. So now, because the city and the Municipal Labor Committee mismanaged that stabilization fund that they had, whose sole purpose was created to pay premium, and it also paid for the widows and children's benefits, there is no funding for them. Right now, even though a couple months ago the mayor told the unions that he would make sure that they were taken care of, they're not. And so that's probably going to come out in the next few weeks. The labor relations, Claire Levitt literally told the unions, sorry, we're not covering this. And these are people who lost their spouses in the line of duty in service to this city. So to say that you should come and work for the city of New York, but then by you doing so at the peril of losing your life, realizing if you do lose your life, you could be put in a situation to not just lose your healthcare for your spouse, your kids.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is like I started out this conversation here by saying that I work for the state and am vested in the retirement system. My girlfriend and I are living together. She does not work in for the state, but we have we're doing our kind of long-term plan for how we're going to do this, and these kinds of benefits, being able to make sure that she can be covered by my
benefits,
by my state benefits are pretty much, they're essential to our long-term plan for our life together. And if we were to lose that, I would not, if somebody, if 30 years from now, somebody tells me that, oh, well, sorry, we misplaced the funds, or we can't
right.
do this, I would not accept that as an acceptable, that you've essentially robbed me of decades of my life, and left my family out to dry.
Yeah, absolutely. Ellen says some cities in the U.S. have built subsidized housing complexes that are entirely for public servants. New York City has a large in-rem portfolio. Why not take these over to use for housing for public servants?
So I think trying to provide housing specifically for a specific employer, I think might run you into fair housing problems. I don't think the city could say, we're only having these for city employees. What they could do is they could take that in-rem portfolio and convert it to housing that is affordable at a wage that city employee, public servants can afford, and then people would be able to get them, which we really don't do enough of. I saw somebody else in the chat mentioned New York. It used to be if you had employment in the public sector, that was considered, you were set for life as you had a solid middle class life, so long as you kept showing up and doing your job and putting your years. Right. The housing situation in the city was very much a part of that. Right now, it wasn't just that, you got better benefits back then, or you had a higher relative wage, but, the city was just affordable for the middle class, and it is not right now. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we've kind of neglected our responsibility as, the council and the other elected officials have kind of neglected to really think about the future of the city and how we're going to retain a middle class and how we're going to create that kind of affordable housing, that kind of a housing environment. And I think, taking in-rem properties and converting them to affordable housing is definitely a cost-effective way to do
that. Brooklyn is out of control. My old block, they put up condos, quote, affordable housing, where the penthouse was $1.5 million, a block away from the Fort Greene projects.
I don't think that we should be subsidizing affordable housing if it's costs more than $1 million. That's
no. We in the city of New York, back in the 70s, the union leader of Local 3 built Electchester. The union literally built Electchester in Queens, which was for young union electrical workers.
Yeah.
Kind of like on the same realm as some of the other, like the theory of the Mitchellamas.
Yeah.
So
I
you
think
have,
Electrical was a Mitchellama.
yeah, so you have a community that's based of those union type workers. Now, another type of a housing would be like a 55 and over community. Those communities have to be a majority. I think they're only allowed to have less than 20% of people that are not 55 and over. So you could technically go in there. You may not be able to bring kids in there, but you could have a younger population in there as long as over 20, the majority was your 55 and over. There could be something that they could create in similarity where the majority, they could create you're right, housing that would be affordable for city workers, make a percentage that would be for city workers and a percentage for the general public, make it open for everybody. That, especially if it's near where majority of some of these city jobs are, or city hospitals, or some of the municipal buildings, might truly be helpful. So, I mean, there's so many different things that they could come up with if they were just a little bit more.
Yeah, I think there is more than enough room in New York City for everybody who wants to live here to have to be able to build a home that kind of works for their family at all the different points in their life, so long as you put a little bit of thought into it. And the situation that we've been living with right now is that there just hasn't been a lot of forward thinking about this. Everything is kind of thought about one project at a time. The costs are totally out of control. Nobody's really thinking about how much it costs.
No. Art asks, what is your position on qualified immunity for law enforcement?
So I don't think that the city council could change that one way or the other. I think that
is that a state law?
A combination of federal and state law. We run into a position where people don't want to, people feel like they don't trust that their public officials, whether you're talking about elected officials, whether you're talking about city employees, whether you're talking about anybody kind of in a position of authority in the government, is necessarily acting with their best interests in mind. And I think that has created really a crisis of accountability, and qualified immunity is definitely part of that. I do not want to make, we were talking earlier about, how difficult it is to retain qualified public servants. And I don't want to make retaining the jobs of police officers or other law enforcement officials harder by kind of creating this specter of potential lawsuit over them. But it is really important for accountability that the public know that, they are working with the public's best interest in mind. And so I do think that making some adjustments to the qualified immunity rules would be a part of that. And, you want to make sure that we don't want to be in a position where people feel like they could be, hurt by a police officer and the police officer face no consequences. But we also want to make sure that the police officer knows that they're not going to, find themselves in a position where they're being unfairly maligned by the public.
Right. Laura says, I don't know why the city is creating so many pedestrian islands and putting up other structures that clutter our streets. I don't know how EMS can even save people with the way our streets are being reconfigured. I was actually watching that the other day. We were coming home from Albany, and I was taking a cab with another retiree, and they literally closed down a road, and they put like artwork in the middle of the street. Like, I don't know how you would get fire trucks or ambulances or anything down that block with it closed off to vehicle traffic.
Yeah. So, I mean, when they do those kinds of, when you're talking about these kinds of redesigns, and I do think that, making more space for pedestrians, especially given all of the, the current crowding that happens on our sidewalks right now between the garbage and the people parking their bikes and people, whizzing by on other kinds of vehicles and the scaffolding and everything. I do think it's important that we create more pedestrian space, especially in Manhattan, where fewer people are driving compared to the other boroughs. But it is the kind of thing that you don't want, what happens on one street affects every other street around it. And we definitely need to do a much better job of thinking about how that space is allocated and the second and third order effects of that's going to have on the surrounding blocks, because you can definitely see it in a lot of the traffic patterns that happen. We did limit car traffic on 14th Street, and it doesn't always work the way that I think people want it to, but it largely worked. It sped up the buses. It created, more space for pedestrians in the area around Union Square. And I really think that, because that was maybe a more well-considered plan compared to some of the other ones, it had better effect. So really those are just the kinds of things that you need to think about, not just the one street, how you're going to allocate the space, but how it's going to impact the streets around it, and you can make it work a lot better.
Gotcha. Ellen says, would you be willing to allow zoning changes for micro units for new buildings in your district? This would help young civil servants and many older seniors, especially city retirees.
Yes, definitely. That's, I came into this with, and you can go on my website. It has there's an issues page where I've included a lot of very detailed policy stuff around a couple key policy issues. Housing is one of them. And these kinds of changes in the building code and the zoning code to accommodate different types of housing than what gets built now is definitely a part of that. So the smaller units are things like SROs, which historically were a major part of, what housing looked like in the city, not for, families, but for people who, either people who were just moving and starting their careers, or older people whose kids had moved out and didn't want to have to pay for, a much larger house since they didn't have their family living there. This was an option that worked for them. It was cheap. It wasn't a lot of space that they'd have to take care of. And then the city started trying to phase them out because they said that was low class housing that they didn't want around the 1970s. And then that was when we started seeing, street homelessness and
Right.
People with drug abuse and mental issues appearing on the streets. And that became kind of a persistent problem that New York has struggled with ever since. So I don't think that you can divorce those two things from one another, that we intentionally got rid of this type of housing that worked for lower income people, or, was it intentionally kind of cheap housing, and then immediately started seeing people sleep on the street. So yeah, I would definitely be in favor of bringing that back.
So we'll wrap this up. Patricia says, will you sign on to our Bill 1096, which will protect our health care?
Yeah, the Marianne said at the beginning, the reason I'm here is because we've been talking, and I'm very much committed to making sure that you get to keep the health care that you need, and that we are making sure that retirees, that the city is not breaking its promises to retirees. I really hope that I will be elected and be on the city council and be in a position to fight for it. But I also hope that we are going to have a new mayor in the next year, and that by the time I'm in office, we will have somebody who's not relentlessly trying to snatch away your health care, and that we can come up with a better way to make this actually work. But yeah, so I'm 100% committed.
Thank you. We actually recently helped a candidate win a special election, Frank Morano, in District 51 in Staten Island. And he put on social media just the other day that he went through that process. I'm missing the word, where they swore him in 2 weeks ago. And then this week he messaged us on social media and told us that his very first official act was signing onto our legislation. So we were so excited to see that. We know he's running, he has to run in the general election this year, but we're going to go back out and again and help and support Frank on that as well. So it's super nice to see that when you do, this is what we keep telling people, is we need to elect people that listen to the issues, that are willing to speak to you, listen to their constituents and understand the problems. And when they don't, ask you more questions and then get behind you, not just ignore you. So I'm going to give you the last few minutes to close, to tell everyone whatever you want to say.
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate this opportunity to talk to you. I really appreciate getting to, share a little bit of my experience and a little bit of what I care about in the city. I like to think that I am a very open, kind of accessible person. So my email is on my website, voteben.nyc. There's a contact page there where you can shoot me an email. if you have any additional questions that we didn't talk about tonight, or if there's anything else. But I really do hope that every city employee or city retiree who is watching this, but especially the ones who will be voting in the Democratic primary in June in Council District 4, know that I really want to be a champion for you, and that these are issues that I really care deeply about, and that I hope I'll have your support. Thank you.
And let's repeat that. So you are they need to vote for candidates in the Democratic primary. Early voting is June 14th to the 22nd, 24th.
I have it written.
I think
down.
it's the 22nd. I know.
It's the 14th to the 22nd, and then the primary is on the 24th. June
24th. So he's a Democratic candidate running in District 4, which is currently the current city council person there. So you can put a name to the district if you don't know your number, is Keith Powers. He is leaving that district and running for another position. So this is what we're introducing you to candidates that could be running for that seat. So thank you, Ben, for sitting with us tonight for this hour. We appreciate you taking all these questions. You've got some support here in the comments, which you can see on your side, and everyone really truly appreciates you spending the time with us and supporting our issues and listening to the things that are important to us and sharing what's important to you. So thank you very much. And we're going to wish you a good evening and let us know if there's anything we can do to help you. And you're welcome to always come back.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
You're welcome. Good night. So everyone, that was about it. That was a really good interview. I hope you enjoyed it. We have more interviews coming up this week. I do want to remind you that I need you to save on your calendars June 5th as well as June 11th. I'll be posting on those as soon as I can. I'm going to hope I can do that tonight. That way you can make those arrangements. June 5th is in Lower Manhattan. June 11th is in Nassau County. It's an all-day event. If you can only show up for the afternoon, that's fine. But I'm looking to bring a couple hundred people with us so that we can have a really good afternoon together. So anything else that you need from us, I will be back on Friday. You will hear me on WBAI at 7 a.m. on what's happening on our radio show at 7 a.m. I think we're probably going to continue talking about the healthcare debacle with United Healthcare and whatever else comes up, because I haven't yet planned that. And then, of course, we have our Friday Night Live. So I will see you guys on Friday morning. And if anything else comes up, we'll just break into our Facebook page and let you know. Thank you for your support. If you see down below, the ticker is for Ben Wetzler for District 4. His website is www.voteben.nyc. Have a great night, and I'll see you in a few days.
Don't speak what you don't understand. The truth is not in